translate existing evidence into something that can be used then for a decision-making process, which means we are a sort of science policy interface for soil-related issues. Now, addressing soil contamination and soil pollution, I need to go back to our flagship product. One of our first outputs in 2015, in occasion of the World Soil Day, and in combination with the United Nations International Year of Soils of 2015, we released the first ever Status of World Soil Resource Report. It's a report of more than 600 pages containing more or less the status of the current knowledge of soils globally and also regionally. Within that report, you will find some data and information about soil pollution and contamination, particularly, and of course I don't have the time to go into details, but you will find a ranking by regions of the relevance of the various threats. Here you have the 10 threats on the top, sorry, maybe not very readable, but one of them is soil pollution. And soil pollution, then you get the different colors in these boxes where the problem is more serious and where it is less relevant, so a ranking. And certainly our region here is one of the highest ranking problems. In Europe particularly, as you heard also from my colleague Jean Masson, soil contamination and pollution is a burning issue, but also in other parts of the world like Asia, North Africa, and other parts. Now, it's not only scientific evidence that is mobilizing things. Very often it's also emotional reactions, and particularly hitting the news. Soil contamination and soil pollution is typically something which is immediately generating interest by the general public. This is because, as you heard also before, there's a direct, evident link for anybody between soil contamination and human health, soil contamination and our general well-being. And that's why usually, as soon as any type of data or information gets to the general press and to the information world, to the general public, it generates usually quite some news and quite some reaction. For example, recent reports from colleagues from China showing that more than a fifth of China's soils are contaminated. Or from my country, typically the big concern that we have in the area called in Italian terra dei fuochi, which is a triangle of death in some English literature in southern Italy, in the area around Naples. So this type of information immediately generating very emotional reactions, and that's where then science should come in. We should bring in the discussion on solid scientific evidence, and that's actually what we are trying to do with our panel. We are trying to stick to solid science, stick to what is published in peer-reviewed publication, and stick to data and information that is reliable and can be verified. Of course, we are still in the beginning, as also my colleague was saying in the previous presentation, of collecting data globally. There are many reports released regularly. For example, there is a regular report about the world's first pollution problems. In the 2016 report, you will find a ranking of the major issues that are affecting the health of people, calculated in daily adjusted life year that gets lost by these type of activities. The champion is the use of lead acid batteries, then mining and ore processing, lead smelting, tanneries, all kind of activities that are known to be affecting our health and are usually affecting soils. So it's essentially the problem of the toxic beneath our feet, and you can find this type of reports quite extensively available to you. A crucial issue, for example, which is emerging is the issue of small and artisanal mining. Often large parts of the population are active in mining activities which are heavily polluting activities on soils and affecting the health of people. So there are a number of issues that are on the table if you want to address soil pollution in a consistent way, and issues that are affecting population quite dramatically. There is a ranking even of the champions, so there's a regular reporting of the top 10 polluted sites in the world. These are sites usually that underwent quite dramatic events, usually mining sites, but also, for example, sites where there were major nuclear accidents or major contamination effects on soils. And of course, all this, since it's linked to health, is drawing the attention not only of the soil community and of the environmental protection community, but particularly of the health and human health protection community. So there is a report from the World Health Organization on contaminated sites and health, and there's a working group of the WHO on this. There was a report also from us as Commission of the soil contamination impacts on human health. So there's plenty going on this, and I think here we have a task in front of us to bring all this together into a consistent reporting. Always keeping in mind, as I said, that we should stick to data. And so let me spend a few words on what was already mentioned by my colleague from DG Environment about collecting hard data about soil contamination requires going into the field and taking samples and measuring. There is no other way to do this. In Europe, we do this on a regular grid, and the system that was just mentioned, Lucas, is a 2x2 kilometer grid where there are surveyors going, taking samples and sending them to a lab, and then we measure what we find. Of course, this needs to be done in a very standardized way, and I go into the details, but I think that's what you need also in other parts of the world if you want to go back to reality. This data then, of course, is important that they get available to everybody, to the public. There is an issue of access to the general public of soil pollution information. I think it's important that we guarantee that the citizens are in the position to access soil contamination data. This is because it's data that affect the health of these people. So we are trying to be as transparent as possible. For example, you may then access our data on heavy metals. This is the distribution of several heavy metals in Europe, without going into any details. Some of these data then become particularly policy relevant. I just picked out, for example, the recent discussion we're having in Europe in relation to the actual cadmium levels that we should regulate within phosphate fertilizers. As you know, phosphate fertilizers typically may have quite variable levels of naturally present cadmium in the phosphate materials, the geological material. So we are quite interested in that, and you see what the map with the little blue dots, the areas where there is quite substantial high level of cadmium in soils, which are very often also agricultural areas. So we need to keep an eye on these areas where there is our food coming from and where there could be a connection between contamination levels in the agricultural soils and our food chain. Later on, you will hear a presentation on the same, based on the same survey, but on organics, and particularly one molecule that is drawing our attention recently also in Europe, which is a molecule that is at the basis of the glyphosate. So we will hear this later on by Professor Geisen from Wageningen University based on our Lucas data. So I don't say more about that, but it's again a quite interesting issue. As ITPS, so we have a plan to compile by end of this year an assessment of the impact of plant protection products on soil function and soil ecosystems. The assessment is ongoing. We will get the first draft probably after our next ITPS plenary in October. It will be essentially addressing plant protection products and their impact on sustainable soil management, particularly since sustainable soil management, according to the voluntary guidelines for sustainable soil management, is defined as a soil that can still provide the necessary ecosystem services to us, supporting, provisioning, regulating cultural services, and so on. So the basic perspective of that report will be looking into the fact that soils are alive and are providing services to us. So there is an issue that you must keep in mind when you talk about soil pollution, that soil pollution is affecting the life in soils, and if soils are not alive anymore, they are not very healthy also for us in general. So we aim in addressing soil contamination and soil pollution in the context of the ecosystem services that soils are delivering to us, keeping in mind that ecosystem services often are competing, and often also the provision of the various services needs to be balanced with the actual needs by the populations. So this is in a nutshell what we are planning to do and where we are. Of course, there could be entire weeks of discussions on soil contamination. I don't think we have the time in this event, but I think we're looking forward to the opportunity that is now in front of us of the next conference that the GSP will organize in 2018 on soil contamination, that hopefully will provide all the evidence that will make us, give us the possibility to move on this topic. So thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much, Luca. Very informative, and